Some sound.
Hello, Peter, can you hear me? Testing 1, 2, 3. Anyone hear me?
We can hear you.
Not sure that's a good thing, but we'll continue.
I've got my earplugs in.
Attaboy, Peter. I still don't hear the mayor. Nope, nothing. Anyone else hear the mayor? It says you're muted, Mr. Mayor.
What about now?
Lots of feedback, and I heard somebody say, how about now?
And can you hear me now?
There you are, a little echoey.
With a little sort of special.
Laptop.
Sounds like we're at a Pink Floyd concert from the 70s.
We paid extra for those effects.
No, but it was. Everyone in here needs their laptops muted. Their audio muted.
The adventures of high-tech hybrid meetings.
That sounds a lot better.
It does. There you go. So I'm going to try one more time. Councillors Cooper and Bocek, did you hear my earlier request if there was any conflicts of interest or pecuniary interest and that sort of thing?
No conflicts here.
No conflict, and I didn't hear you.
Okay, well, I appreciate your confirmations. Thank you very much. All right. With that, let's see if we can't get to our first deputation. I believe that is from the Severn Sound Environmental Association. Ms. Cayley, will you be leading this presentation?
Thank you, Your Worship. I will.
I think we're now ready. Thank you for your patience.
No worries. Thank you very much. And good morning, Your Worship, members of council and staff. And thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning about the services that the Severn Sound Environmental Association provides to you and your ratepayers, and to answer any questions you have about the budget letter you have in the package in front of you this morning. My name's Julie Cayley. I'm the Executive Director. Joining me today are Melissa Carruthers, your risk management official and inspector, as well as our water scientist, limnologist, Aisha Chiandet, who I don't see on yet. So hopefully she will be able to join us.
Sorry if I may interrupt. Aisha needs to accept an invite to be promoted to panelist.
Okay. I see her joining now. Thank you very much. And I forgot to share my screen. So. Hopefully you can see the presentation slides.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. So I think you all know where you're situated within the Severn Sound, and we, the SSEA, were established by our member municipalities in 2007 as your joint municipal service board. We are mandated to provide environmental services to you, our member municipalities, and we do this in part to ensure that the delisting objectives that were met when Severn Sound was removed as one of the Great Lakes areas of concerns are maintained, as well as to provide the services that we are directed to by our board, which are made up of representatives from our 8 member municipalities. Obviously, that includes Georgian Bay Township. I'd like to take this opportunity just for a quick thank you to Paul Wayenko for his long-term commitment on the SSEA board as your past representative. The SSEA is also your source protection authority as designated under the Clean Water Act. And with that, I'd like to pass this to Melissa Carruthers, the risk management inspector and official. I saw Melissa on, but I don't.
Yeah, sorry. Hi, Julie. Hi. Good morning, Council. So just quickly jumping into some of our programs, starting with the Drinking Water Source Protection Program, which is under the Clean Water Act. It has an overall goal of protecting municipal drinking water sources from overuse and contamination. And under this program, SSEA serves 2 completely different roles. The first is as a source protection authority, so of which we've been delegated by the province and listed in regulation to act in this capacity. Within the Severn Sound watershed, there is no other option but to use us in this role. This work is currently being funded by the province and is offered as a core service of the SSEA. This work is more high-level policy work, making sure your staff have the tools they need, making sure program is working through an annual reporting process and advising staff and residents if the Clean Water Act applies to various situations and how. The second role that we or I play is as your risk management official and inspector. Each municipality within a source protection area legally needs to have one. For you, this work is paid for the district municipality of Muskoka, as it is their jurisdiction of their water system, sorry. And in this role, I implement policies in the local source protection plan, which requires dealing directly with local residents and businesses, reviewing development applications within vulnerable areas to ensure there is no risk to municipal water supplies. Next slide, please. We are pleased to be able to continue to offer the tree seedling and distribution programs. We've planted nearly 4,000 trees in the township of Georgian Bay since 2016 and are accepting orders for this year's tree distribution program until January 13th. We recently received funding from the federal 2 Billion Trees program to help us increase our tree planting capacity and are looking for input of how to plant more trees in the township, which also helps you meet your climate action goals. An area we feel that the township is currently underutilizing SSEA is our ability to review and comment on land use planning and policy in terms of water quality, invasive species, and habitat. And we can help meet the requirements of policies related to natural heritage and water resources in provincial planning policy and in Georgian Bay's official plan. We have expertise enabling us to assist with peer review process of projects, plans, or environmental impact studies, which can be done at the request of the township with respect to natural heritage or water quality. Next slide, please. Some of the services we provide are funded at a cost recovery rate or supported by external funding sources. Huge thank you to council and staff who assisted with the Deep Pave project at Honey Harbor Park last year, as well as the Baxter Ward Lions Club and Honey Harbor Public School for participating in a pollinator planting day afterwards. We plan on continuing our education and outreach work around pollinators and supporting the township as a Bee City member in 2023 and beyond. Next slide, please. As SSEA partners, you have access to our very comprehensive invasive species program with just a few of the key outcomes and services being the Severn Sound Invasive Species Strategy, which provides a long-term framework with strategic actions that help to maximize the benefits of a shared program. We do offer the Invasive Species Working Group, so this is an opportunity to share knowledge and voice concerns among SSEA partners. There's annual invasive species reports specific to your township, and that's just to name a few. And with that, I'll pass it to Aisha for the remainder of the presentation.
Thanks, Melissa. So next slide there. So with this slide and the next one, you'll see the broader picture of our monitoring programs and how sites in your township and beyond fit within our watershed-based work. Water quality data has been collected in the Severn Sound open waters, including downstream of Port Severn and on the Severn River at Lock 45 for many years. And the ability to analyze trends and look for relationships between stressors and water quality indicators is really invaluable. Information on water levels is also critical for managing shorelines, and we help to maintain the gauge in Midland Harbor. With support from external grants, we've also developed citizen science programs to broaden our monitoring reach and had 7 volunteers in the township last season. Volunteers submit valuable data on water quality conditions, and there's huge benefit in engaging residents in observing and protecting the places they care about. Next slide. Additional programs focus on tributaries and climate. Stream invertebrate sampling helps us to holistically assess tributary health, and a recently established site at the Baxter Lake Dam has given us some insight on water quality leaving the lake. We'll be sampling that again this season. We continue to track temperature at a long-term site on the Severn River in order to detect any changes that might impact walleye spawning downstream of the Bayview Dam. Our ongoing climate monitoring program consists of a network of sites across the watershed, which are also relevant for Southern Georgia Bay Township. The data is used to track trends and interpret findings from other monitoring work and to support the work of other agencies. For example, looking at the influence of weather conditions on algae growth and water quality. Our core monitoring programs give the township access to background data and support to make informed resource management and land use planning decisions. Additionally, Severn Sound was delisted under the condition that environmental quantity monitoring continue. Next slide. Our monitoring of Honey Harbor water quality is an additional service we deliver, which is provided at our partner rate and will continue in 2023 with your support. Results of monitoring, which is conducted every 2 weeks from May to October, are used to assess current conditions and trends in water quality from an ecosystem perspective, and also make recommendations on actions needed to protect water quality. We also watch for harmful algae blooms and act as a technical liaison with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks on reporting blooms. This monitoring has been ongoing since 1998 and focuses on indicators of nutrient enrichment and algae growth that are widely accepted by the scientific community. We have significant partnership with the province that allows us to do this work. We receive lab load at no cost, a value of about $10,000, and this has allowed us to maintain a long-term high-quality data set that is considered the gold standard by many agencies. This work has also been presented at the International Association for Great Lakes Research conferences, where we've benefited from discussions with other Great Lakes scientists. As always, we're open to discussions about adjusting what we're testing for to meet the township's needs and budget. Next slide. We deliver additional services such as commenting on provincial policy and providing support at deputations like AMO and Great Lakes Cities, St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, providing a united voice representing our 8 municipal partners. We also have partnerships with a number of academic and government research institutions, which has allowed us to increase our project capabilities and access additional expertise. Next slide. The Sustainable Severn Sound project is an SSEA project that supports the township with climate change action focused on greenhouse gas emission reductions. We are the associate member on behalf of the township for the Partners for Climate Protection program, and we'll be working with you in 2023 to formalize your implementation plan to achieve milestone 4. We also represent our municipal partners as a member of the Health Unit's Climate Change Exchange Network. Next slide. So you have access to a team of highly qualified individuals with very diverse expertise who look forward to working with you in 2023 and beyond. We're fortunate to have significant longevity among a lot of our senior staff and thus have exceptional historical local knowledge. Next slide. So you have our 2022 budget information in your agenda package, and we're happy to take questions on that or anything else that we presented today. And I'll pass it back to Julie to field questions.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. It's appreciated. Council, any questions in regard to the presentation? Councillor.
Thank you for your presentation this morning. Just one very quick question in terms of your waste monitoring and the water quality monitoring. You just mentioned that you are doing human waste monitoring. Are you doing DNA testing on the samples or some other method?
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Predko. We don't do waste discharge monitoring. We are monitoring the open waters, and we are also not doing DNA sampling. If there's any further detail, I would refer that to Aisha, our expert.
No, I think that I realize you're doing the open water, but I was just wondering how you were sampling to determine whether it's human waste or E. coli versus animal. And I don't know if you have any further answer on that.
Yeah, thank you, through your worship. Councillor Predko, we don't sample bacteria. Aisha, as our expert, has certainly looked at open water bacteria monitoring and did not feel in advising us as our scientists that was something that would add value in terms of adding to the word is escaping me, the nutrient monitoring and the different factors. We do monitor for phosphorus, nitrogen, nutrients that we can associate with different sources as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Cooper, followed by Councillor Jarvis, please.
Well, thank you for the report, and just a couple of questions here. One is, I think I heard you say, it may have been Aisha, that in Honey Harbor, the frequency of testing is, well, not the frequency, but the testing runs from May to October every 2 weeks. Is that what I heard?
Yes.
And so just to understand, in the last 3 years, has that frequency been maintained?
Thank you, through your worship. I see Aisha nodding yes, Councillor Cooper. So
COVID has had no impact on your testing program?
It did in the beginning, Councillor Cooper, and in terms of the lab's ability to take our samples, but we have been able to maintain having our staff safely work in the field and safely work with our providers like our boat captain and those sorts of pieces. So we have been able to continue to deliver that program.
So just a couple of other questions around testing locations and so on. You talked about, I think, 2 locations in Port Severn, one at the sort of entrance to the bay, shall we say, at the locks, and then another location further out from that location to see how much, I guess, there's dilution and so forth. Is that what has happened, A, and B, frequency in those locations, please?
Thank you, through your worship. If I could ask Aisha maybe to unmute and answer that.
Sure, no problem. So I'll just touch on locations and frequency. So these are actually 2 different programs that those waters are tested. So right at basically upstream of Lock 45, that's tested through the Provincial Water Quality Monitoring Network. So we get an allocated lab load for that, which is out of our control because the province completely covers that program. So that's tested 8 times per year, and it's spread over the entire year. So we do get some winter data from that program, which is interesting. So it's not necessarily directly comparable to our open water station, which, as we mentioned, is sampled every 2 weeks from May to October. So the frequency doesn't entirely not line up, but that doesn't mean that we can't use the data to sort of look at what you mentioned, sort of upstream to downstream type effects. And off the top of my head, I would have to do a little bit of background work to get those results, but that's certainly something that we could get to you.
Thank you for that. And just to summarize what you've said is that we get, aside from the Honey Harbor program, which is a different program in the sense that it's extra billing for the township, we get one location. The province covers the other location, and we get one location. We've got thousands of kilometers of shoreline, but we get one location. Is that correct?
Within the sort of the Severn Sound portion of Georgian Bay Township. Yes, that's right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis, please.
Yeah, a couple of questions. First off, I know that in the past there's been talk of Severn Sound Environmental working with the municipalities around Severn Sound on their stormwater runoff situation, the problems they've had. And with climate change, obviously, this is going to be a more serious issue. It's already been acknowledged. where is Severn Sound these days in working with places like Midland, Penetang, and other growing communities and stormwater runoff issues?
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Jarvis. That's really a great question and well timed. The province has certainly is responsible or legally connected to the municipalities regarding your stormwater situations, whether it be stormwater on development sites or that sort of thing. I think if I'm assuming correctly, my guess is you're referring more to the stormwater, the bypasses that some of the larger municipalities have. And so again, they are regulated, and we are working, like we've mentioned in the past. We do work with them as they look for to us for some of our expertise in terms of helping them work on those pieces. In terms of what I think is timely, and Aisha is more connected to this again, but the province is changing, making some changes to stormwater guidelines and monitoring requirements for municipalities around stormwater management. And they have asked us to work with them for a potential pilot for smaller municipalities. So obviously places like Midland, Penetang, Wishing, it could be your municipality, any municipalities that are obviously not over, I believe, there's a population cutoff, and that would be looking specifically at upstream, downstream stormwater. So it would be an additional piece of work. So we're just at the moment we've been spending actually the last year trying to secure funding through the province to help work on that with some of those municipalities that you've just referred to.
So just as follow up then, is there a strategy whereby the SSEA is out on the water after significant storm events to monitor water quality outside of these municipalities to get an idea of what the effect of their bypasses is having on Severn Sound?
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Jarvis. We don't specifically wait for a bypass and then get out in the boat to do that. We don't have the resourcing certainly to do that, or the availability of a boat that on call that we could do that with. We could, I guess, with our canoe, but I would have to look at health and safety guidelines around and timing on how long it would take some of our staff to get out there. Having said that, they would probably love to do that. We do, Aisha would certainly be able to look at our existing data and compare it to timing around stormwater discharge when there's been a bypass or an overflow. And those municipalities do have to report that. So we would know timing, volume, all of those things. And we do have long-term monitoring stations that are within the bays that would likely be impacted by those. If that answers your question, I hope. If not, again, we could ask Aisha for more detail.
No, I think you're doing the best you can do, given the circumstances, is the way I read it right now. And yes, a canoe after a storm out in the water, probably in Severn Sound, is not such a good idea. So I completely understand that. Separate question. We received your financials back in December. It showed a cash surplus 2020 through 2021 that had increased significantly, and the cash surplus of 2021 was pretty significant. Do you have an idea of what your current cash surplus is in relation to 2021? And is that money assigned anywhere, or is it just sitting as a surplus?
Thank you, through your worships, to Councillor Jarvis. So my apologies, I'm just trying to follow here. So you're looking specifically for surplus the 2021 versus 22.
Yeah.
So we don't currently have our 2022 final financials or an audit right at this time. So we certainly would be able to compare those two at that time. As you might remember, not too long ago, we were carrying a deficit. And so we've worked very hard with our board, and particularly, as you could imagine, under the direction of our board, to ensure that we are not in a deficit position. And so I don't have them in front of me, but for us, creating those accounts, surplus accounts, were specific to some potential risk we had within the organization. So future financial risk that we knew would be coming up that we needed to deal with. So most of it is either designated or saved for a particular reason. And I would have to go back and talk to our treasurer to remind me how much of that is I'm again forgetting the term where it's not designated specifically, that it's sort of unattached.
Okay, one further question, if for your indulgence, thank you. And maybe you can remind me of this. I'm going back to the original inception of the SSEA, and your mandate was significantly around, I presume, the drainage basin into Severn Sound. I presume that included the Severn River. So is there significant now historical data on the runoff through the Severn River into Severn Sound? That is information we could mine if we requested it?
Thank you, through your worship. Again, I would defer to Aisha, but I think my answer to that would be yes. Specifically, the station Aisha mentioned, that's a provincial monitoring station, is publicly available data, and we can certainly make sure you have, or your staff or whoever needs, has the direct link to where you can find that data. So the upstream station and the downstream monitoring station, I believe, because it would exist from the time that we've been working with you on the Honey Harbor project. I'm looking to Aisha as a yes or no.
Yeah,
Okay.
pretty close timing.
If you can get a link on that, that'd be great. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor Bocheck, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'll direct my question to Julie, and thanks very much for the detailed report this morning. In the big scheme of things, knowing that you receive funding from municipalities, the province, the feds, probably some private funding, the percentage that Georgian Bay Township plays in funding, I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but if there is a way for you to tell me what percentage Georgian Bay kicks in to your organization, and if you don't have that data, you can always email it to me at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Bocheck. So first of all, our core funding is only from our 8 municipalities, and then any other funding we receive is project specific. So by that, I mean us and our staff applying for external funds. We don't have any base funding from the province or the federal government. We do receive some private donations, and we're working on trying to increase our ability to do that. In terms of your direct question, the overall budget, I could, I'd certainly need to go back and look at that, but I can tell you within the core, compared to the other municipalities, because your percent is based on a number of factors, including the assessment values of the properties within the watershed where the boundary is. I believe you're at, and I will get back to you with a confirmation, but I believe you're at 9% of our, it's 8 or 9% of our total core.
That's fantastic. If there's any difference, you can let me know through an email, but that's great. That helps me with working on my funding for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors want to go around before we give Councillor Cooper a second chance? Not seeing any other hands. Councillor Cooper, I'll give you a second round.
Thank you. And just sort of trying to understand, we talked about a surplus, Julie, but I wondered, did I hear that the only vessel that you have is a canoe to do water testing?
Through your worship, that's correct. Our only asset, let's say, is a canoe. We rent, we don't rent, I'm sorry, we hire a boat and captain. That's an auxiliary Coast Guard out of Penetanguishene, who we're not sure how much longer we will have that individual. They've been with us quite some time, and may at some point decide that's enough of that. And we would certainly be, I know, particularly for the October sampling, we hire out of closer to usually your township, usually trying to find someone with a barge or somebody else. There tends to be ice that time of year, or can be. So, but you're correct. That's the canoe is the only, other than a van, are the only 2 big things we own.
Thank you for that. And given your surplus, it would be maybe a consideration to have a vessel so that you could go out at not just when somebody's available, because as I understand it from a water testing perspective, it's important to test also when there's been a fair bit of rain and runoff. So just a thought for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I'm going to say thank you very much for your presentation. It's greatly appreciated. And I'm sure we'll be talking soon.
Great. Thank you, Your Worship. And if there's any questions or any other information anybody needs, please do reach out to me.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, Council. Next on our agenda is Muskoka Algonquin Healthcare. And judging by the people I see in the audience, I think this is going to be a live in-person presentation. They want you to push the silver button.
And we have a presentation. Oh, sorry.
So if you'll just advise me when you want next slide.
Thank you. Good morning, members of council and staff. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you today. My name is Moreen Miller. I'm the chair of the Muskoka Algonquin Healthcare Board of Directors. And with me today is President and CEO Cheryl Harrison, as well Vice Chair Dave Wuffelman, who's Vice Chair of the board with us, is with us today as well. Muskoka Algonquin Healthcare's vision to reimagine local hospital care with 2 new sites in Muskoka is coming closer to reality. Next slide, please. To date, local leaders have been especially supportive. Bracebridge Council has allocated $230,000 to the ongoing costs, while Huntsville Council has allocated $115,000 to the new hospital builds. This is on top of the districts of Muskoka's cumulative allocation of $1.6 million. We look forward to ongoing support towards the community's share of the new hospitals. Next slide, please. Earlier this summer, the ministry changed how they number the various phases of capital redevelopment. If it wasn't complicated already, they made it a little more complicated and changed the numbering system. What's included in each phase remains the same, but the numbering has changed. So if you see in the slide, what was once stage, in our case, stage 2 is now called stage 1.3 and is part of early planning. In April, our stage 1 proposal, as you may remember, now referred to as stage 1.2, was approved, and Premier Doug Ford announced a $14 million grant to proceed further with capital planning to modernize and expand MAX 2 sites. And this covers the cost of the planning work for early planning, all of stage 1 in the slide, and detailed planning, all of stage 2. To keep our momentum going, we hope to submit the stage 1.3 proposal back to the functional program back to the province by September 30th, 2023. Next slide, please. So what has been approved? One project to build 2 new sites. In Huntsville on the existing land at 100 Frank Miller Drive, which can accommodate a new build because there's enough space, and in Bracebridge on new land through a site selection process. So I'm going to hand it over to Cheryl now, and she's going to talk to you about a few of the details.
Great, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to be here today to share with you why we need the new hospitals. Next slide, please. You read a lot about hallway medicine, and we also are plagued by hallway medicine at Muskoka, Algonquin. A patient should not have to wait in a stretcher for greater than 6 hours before they can be admitted to a room. Hospitals ideally should be sitting at about 85% occupancy. We are consistently over 100% and often up into 130% occupancy. As well, we know our emergency department, and this is a portion and picture of our emergency department in Huntsville. We know that it's been built half the size that it should be, along with diagnostic services, two of the most important things of a hospital. We use many Band-Aid solutions over the years so that we can try to do the best we can with the spaces that we have. As you can see in this slide, the nursing station's in the middle. You've got EMS over on the right-hand side, a stretcher in the middle to accommodate probably another admitted patient. As well, various components of our diagnostic imaging are spread out today by virtue of just being able to unable to co-locate them in fixed spaces. So often we see our patients having to walk to many different parts of the hospital to access the different services. Next slide, please. This is a rendering from Trillium Health Partners, and one way to help us solve hallway medicine is to make sure we have adequate space in our emergency department so that the flow can be well defined. Next slide, please. Another reason for our needing our new hospitals is that, as I've said, space is tight everywhere. Often people have to wait. They're almost always anxious, and they're often in pain. Next slide. And again, in this rendering at St. Joseph's Regional Health Center, registering and waiting for care should be as comfortable as possible. Next slide. When we talk about inpatient occupancy, we talk also about the type of rooms we have in hospital. The provincial standard is to have at least 80% of your rooms to be private. Our hospital has 15%, with the majority of them being 2-bed and 4-bed rooms. Private rooms aren't just a nice to have, they are overwhelming benefits for private rooms, including being able to manage infection control, reducing the spread of infection, and also the important part of when people are in hospital, being able to have space so that their family can be with them. And the lack of private rooms at MAC has been a considerable challenge for us over the last 3 years with the pandemic and being able to meet the standard of isolation requirements. Next slide. This is a rendering from Halton Healthcare in Milton, and as you can see here, private room with ample space. All the technology and equipment that's needed for the patient is in that patient's room, and they also have their own bathroom. Next slide. Our aging infrastructure is overwhelming at MAC, and by a facility assessment is rated overall in poor condition at both sites. At the top is one of our nursing stations on our inpatient unit, and the bottom is our lab in Huntsville. In many ways, our old buildings don't meet current best practices for healthcare delivery. With challenges in attracting and retaining healthcare professionals, our dated facilities should not be an additional barrier to that. And also, whenever we make changes, we try to, accommodate and upgrade things. We must meet current standards, and that limits our capacity to renovate existing spaces. Even small renovations, which one would think putting in a hand washing sink, can cost up to 2 to 3 times more in the hospital setting. Next slide. Wouldn't this be more suitable and appropriate? This is an example of a nursing station at Brockville General Hospital, where there's lots of space and room for the team to be able to plan and deliver care for their patients. Next slide. So this stage of planning will also require us to choose new land in Bracebridge. South Muskoka today is bordered by environmentally protected ravine and is in a residential neighborhood. The property itself is too small to support a new hospital to meet our future needs. On the slide are the criteria that we'll be using in the site selection. A hospital's location has a significant impact on the sustainability and affordability of service delivery, and most importantly, the community's access. It's important for us that the future property is well suited and that all options are considered. A comprehensive and transparent process is underway so that we can ensure that we are selecting the appropriate space, and I'll speak to some of the engagement that we're going to use for that. Next slide. Also, like just like the past, this stage will involve significant stakeholder input from our staff, physicians, volunteers, patients, families, and other stakeholders in our community, as well as supplemented by a number of consultants. This input into future delivery service and building design is an essential component, and user groups are being gathered this month to be able to get that input. Next slide. The ministry covers the lion's share of the project, leaving the community to raise what we call local or community share according to a formula. Generally, the community's share can be up to 30% of the total project costs. 10% is the building cost. The ministry covers 90%, where local share is responsible for 10%, and all the furnishings, fixtures, and equipment that we'll need to open the new hospital. We also need, local share has to cover any revenue generating work such as parking or gift shop. In the previous stage of planning, a preliminary order of magnitude was conceptualized in 2019 dollars based on assumptions that we knew at that time. What we know now is because of post-pandemic prices, if the original project plan was built today, the initial 2019 estimate of the cost of the project would be 561 million and would have increased our local share. That's just the project cost. If we were to look to 2022 costs, it would have gone up to 722 million. And the community share today in today's dollar would have grown from 167 to 167 million. And efforts to forecast the potential cost at a time of construction, we're looking at 2027. And that would just be starting the RFP process for construction. The cost of the project could be as high as 967 million, with a local share of about 225 million that will need it to be raised. We're relying on our foundations, local municipalities, and the District of Muskoka, together with our own organization, to raise the local share. Each entity has to participate starting now. And the bottom line is, if we don't have the local share satisfied, we cannot move on into the next stage. And setting aside funds now is far easier than trying to put it off and to the same amount and half the time. We do know that because of some of the changes that we're not aware of, that we can adjust the number as we go forward over the next 5 to 10 years. Next slide. As part of our stakeholder engagement, we're excited to hold some community open houses early in this year to keep our communities updated on the project, as well as engaging them in the Bracebridge site selection process. We look forward to hearing from our local communities on both of these issues. We want to know what's important to them in terms of access to their hospital, and we'll be using criteria, as I mentioned before, for the Bracebridge site. We've broadened, obviously, to the entire District of Muskoka because the Bracebridge site offers some services at one site versus at Huntsville. So we want to make sure that we're getting out to everybody in our communities. We have virtual option on January the 23rd and 25th, which may appeal to your community. And we also will be holding a second series of engagement sessions later on in March to seek even further feedback. And through our planning journey, our website is probably the best place to stay up to date. Together, we can leave this legacy and give our future generations the best hospital care. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate it, and wish you the best of luck with the hospital redevelopment.
Thank you.
Council, any questions? Councillor Bochek.
I apologize, Mr. Mayor. I forgot to lower my hand from the last session.
All right. Then we'll go straight to Councillor Cooper, please.
Thank you for the presentation. Just have sort of more general questions with respect to this project. I note that the Highway 11 corridor has 5 hospitals between North Bay and Barrie, including Vic and Barrie, Soldiers Memorial and Aurelia, Bracebridge, Huntsville, North Bay. I'm failing to understand why Algonquin and the province are interested in having so many locations in such a relatively short distance. Seems like there's a fair bit of duplication. I would have thought that picking either Bracebridge or Huntsville as a location, one only, and I know that was the initial thought, has not come to the surface. I'm trying to understand why we need so many hospitals. It doesn't seem logical. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you for your question. You in fact are correct on the history of this discussion. In previous years, the preliminary recommendation through Muskoka Algonquin Healthcare was for one facility. Further discussion and interaction with the community showed some specific issues that we have in Muskoka, and the primary one of that being distance to get to a facility for acute care. So as you realize in Township of Georgian Bay, you have several options of excellent healthcare facilities in the far northeast part of the Muskoka catchment area in Algonquin Highlands and further east Lake of Bays. Their only option is Huntsville. So moving to a central facility in the end proved that the travel distances for acute care became significantly higher than any other travel distances in the province. So I appreciate your comments about the number of hospitals, but acute care being spread out with small numbers of beds in multiple locations has proved to be a fairly appropriate and long-term appropriate way to deliver that healthcare, especially acute care.
Follow-up question, if I may, Mayor.
Please.
I appreciate the acute care point of view, and I think that's interesting. I do wonder why one of these facilities couldn't have stayed at its current size for acute care only and have a large regional hospital like we have in Barrie. So I'm still wondering why we need 2 when one should be able to do the job and the other one can do the acute care. Was that a given consideration, only expanding one of them? Thank you.
Through you, Mayor. Great question. And I would have to say, to be completely frank, one hospital would be more cost efficient. Whether it would deliver the same excellent healthcare that we have now, that's a question out there. But having said that, we heard comprehensively from the municipalities during the first stage of this, and their wish was to have 2 hospitals. So here we are. I would say that the discussion is not over in terms of which facilities deliver which piece of care. Cheryl spoke about the ongoing work and the focus groups. That's what the focus groups will bring to this process. They will bring to us some better solutions, and some of the ideas that you suggested may in fact be on the table at some point in the next 6 months. So doors not closed. We have a lot of decisions still to make, but the decision to move back to 1 hospital versus 2 is probably not on the table.
If I may, that's not really what I was suggesting. I was suggesting taking one of the 2 hospitals and making it larger to be more of a regional center of excellence, and the other one to handle local acute care and emergency. That was what I was asking. So anyway, I'm glad to hear it's still under review. I think it really needs to be. This is a lot of hospitals in a relatively short area. Thank you. Short space. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to make the observation. I mean, you drove a significant distance to get here. I mean, at least an hour if you came from Bracebridge. If you came from Huntsville, that much more. I'm sure you appreciate as you sit here, we have 3 hospitals that are much closer than Bracebridge. And everywhere in our township, there's a hospital that's closer than Bracebridge. And so while I fully support the redevelopment of your hospitals, even though we can question the design and all that, but I have to caution you that when it comes to local share, it is my intent at district to say, no problem. But 10% of that local share comes from the township of Georgian Bay, and 10% of that local share should go to Perry Sound or Midland because they're closer hospitals. And I think that, you know, you're not going to get me arguing against local share because unfortunately that's the provincial model. But I do think that you're brave to be here when we know that your hospitals serve. I mean, we know in our permanent residents that in inpatients of our permanent residents, 2% of our inpatient stays were in Bracebridge. 98% were not. Over a third were in Perry Sound, over a third in Midland. And then you got RVH. You got we used the hospitals in Toronto more than in Bracebridge. And I think that geographical reality is going to be part of the challenge that you face. And say, I'm not going to argue against the district supporting your hospitals, but I think that, and I would appreciate your understanding and support that a portion of that money should go to the hospitals that serve the residents who will not be using your hospitals. Sorry for my little editorial or perspective, but I think you have to know that.
Yeah, Mayor, thank you so much. And you have communicated that to us previously. We understand that the complicated manner of setting up local share through the municipal structure is not the decision of Muskoka Algonquin Healthcare. It's the decision of the local share committee. And we've had some very good discussion. You're not the only municipality that has brought this to our attention. We also have another part of the catchment being East Perry Sound, where there are 12,000 people in East Perry Sound catchment that no longer have a hospital after the closure of the hospital in the village of Burkes Falls. They still need to be accommodated and serviced by the hospital. So they have a kind of a different problem in that they have many people without with no longer having a full-time hospital within their catchment. So we have a lot of work to do in terms of equaling this out. And I guess the township of Georgian Bay should consider themselves so very lucky that you have such excellent facilities all in close proximity. And in fact, we all did come from different places. Dave from Lake of Bays, myself from Port Carling, and Cheryl from closer. She had the closest drive this morning, but it just goes to show you how big the catchment is. So we appreciate that very much.
And, you know, and like so many other services, the municipal boundaries does not reflect the service boundaries, and that's part of our challenge. Any other comments or questions?
I could just
Please.
don't apologize at all for us being brave. We, you know, I respect the fact that we're a district and that everybody in the district has access to our hospitals, and we want to make sure that we're going out to everybody and having that experience. I have experience working south of here and same issues around the geography and the boundaries. The boundaries for municipal or for healthcare services don't always align to where people are. So we're here because we want to be fair and we want to be transparent and give everybody the same information, and certainly welcome your perspectives. Thank you.
And we appreciate the updates. Thank you very much for driving all this way to see us. And Mr. Uffelman, Peter's brother, right? Okay, I thought so. Thank you. Council, next on our agenda, I have moved by Councillor Bocheck, seconded by Councillor Pedco. Be it resolved, the council adopts the consent agenda of January 9, 2023 as circulated. Any comments or questions? Councillor Hazelton.
I'd like to just ask a question on 6. I'd like to ask a question on 6B. And that means I have to jump down to page 31. Okay, so resolution. So this is in page 45 of the agenda package. Resolution C-2022-291, where it talks about implementing committees. It also says that there's going to be an updated committee terms of reference. And given that committee meetings are starting very soon, I'm wondering how urgent is this action item going to come back to council for us to review modified terms of reference?
Your worship, it was my understanding that the updated terms of reference would only reflect the changes to the specific committees. So we weren't doing an overhaul of the actual terms. It was just going to be a quick update to reference the changes in committees, as well as the updated numbers. That being said, there is the one new committee with the sustainable communities that is tied to the budget slightly as well. So I need information from the Director of Sustainability in order to draft that, but as well, we're waiting on other approvals before bringing that piece forward.
So I understand a potential delay there. We have a planning committee scheduled for February, and if a committee terms of reference didn't come before council at the beginning of February, then any changes in the committee terms of reference wouldn't be reflected before the committee meeting. So that's my concern for, timing and sense of urgency.
I can appreciate your concern. I don't foresee any major changes other than the number of memberships to the policy that will impact planning committee. So at this point, even if we haven't brought it forward and a committee meeting takes place, there's no hindrance as to why that committee meeting can't move forward for the existing committees.
I understand your perspective. I think that it would be useful for council to review committee terms of reference, given that we have 2 new councillors, and given the past councillors who have had an opportunity to review committees and committee activities. I think it would be useful to have a committee terms of reference for in front of council for review and approval before we have committee meetings.
I can appreciate your perspective. That wasn't my understanding of the direction at the time. So it's not on today's agenda.
I understand that. My concern is, I know it's not on today's agenda. It is a commitment. Is there a way that we could have it committed to as a February meeting deliverable agenda item?
I can strive to do my best. I'm not in the business of making promises. I don't know if I can keep them. So I will do my absolute best. I'm coming off of 2 weeks of being off, and today's my first day, and I have 2 weeks of emails to catch up on. So I don't want to make empty promises. If you can appreciate that, I will see what we can do though. I understand it's important. I don't want to make an empty promise. I'm saying I will do everything I possibly can to make sure this comes forward in February. But I don't know what the next 2 days are going to hold for direction from council. There are other reports moving forward and other things that may change the direction and my workload. So I don't want to make a promise now that I can't keep.
Okay, I'll rest. Thank you.
not having necessarily these terms of reference before council, before the next committee meetings, doesn't mean that these meetings cannot keep moving forward. So staff need to prioritize kind of, and again, as Ms. Way is saying, over the next couple of days, what are the activities that are coming out from council. But I think Ms. Way is being sincere when she's saying she will do what she can to get the updated terms of reference for council.
Understood.
Councillor Cooper.
Well, thank you. And I just wanted to weigh in on this subject, and that is that there was a commitment to create some updated terms of reference, particularly for our planning committee, the role of the chair, et cetera, et cetera. And we haven't seen that. And I think we need to see it. Maybe we should postpone our committee meetings until such time as we get the work done. That would be my recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on our consent agenda? I'm going to call the vote then. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bochek.
Thank you for recognizing my hand. My question is to Karen. Karen, the under item C, which was the appointment of the members, noticing that there is a few new members on that committee. I'm just wondering if they have been advised where to find the committee standards and the committee recommendations, terms of reference, etc. on our website. Have they been directed to that part of our website so they can review the current terms of reference?
Through your worship to Councillor Bochek, there are 2 dates for committee trainings that have been scheduled for all of the public committee members. So councillors are not invited to those, so you might not be aware of the dates. One is Wednesday and one I think is the following week. Sorry, I can't recall offhand. And during that training, they will be advised of all of their obligations under the terms of reference, under the legislation, under our conflict of interest, under our procedural bylaw, and all of those things. So they have not as of today, but they will be, and we have training days scheduled for them.
Very good. Look at you right after holidays, being quick to the draw. Thank you very much.
Councillor Hazelton.
Am I to interpret that members of council are not welcome at the training sessions?
It wasn't that you're not welcome, it's just going to be very repetitive, and we've covered most of everything in those trainings already in your orientation.
Thank you.
All right. The motion in front of us read, be it resolved that council adopts the consent agenda of January 9th, 2023 as circulated. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. We're going to take a quick break here because apparently there's some issue, a technical issue that we're not aware of. One moment, please.